Back in 1991, there was a ghost haunting the skies over Baghdad. It was this black, angular specter that the world's most advanced air defenses just couldn't see. We're talking about the F-117 Nighthawk, America's legendary invisible jet. And get this, during the Gulf War, it flew nearly 1,300 missions, and not a single one was lost. It was literally the ghost in the machine of modern war.
For years, the F-117 was way more myth than machine. It became this symbol of total American air power. I mean, its design was so revolutionary, it didn't just dodge radar. It felt like it was breaking the laws of physics. It was, for all intents and purposes, completely untouchable.
All right, so let's get right into it, because on March 27th, 1999, the impossible happened. Right over the skies of Yugoslavia, the ghost got caught. The whole myth of invincibility just shattered when an F-117, call sign Vega 31, got hit and went tumbling down to Earth. The entire world was just stunned. How could this even happen?
But what if that one famous shootdown, the one that made headlines everywhere, wasn't the whole story? What if the official story, the one we've all been told for the last 25 years, is actually hiding a much, much bigger secret? So the stage for this absolutely incredible story is set on the night of March 27th, 1999. We're in the middle of this intense NATO bombing campaign over Yugoslavia, a mission that was supposed to be totally routine for the most advanced jet in the world. Well, it turned into a complete history-making disaster.
Now, to really understand how this all went down, we have to unpack one of the greatest ironies of the entire Cold War. And believe it or not, the story doesn't start in some high-tech American lab. No, it starts deep inside the Soviet Union, with a physicist whose own government thought his work was, well, useless.
You heard that right. Let me introduce you to Pyotr Yakovlevich Ufimtsev. This man is without a doubt the most unlikely architect of American stealth technology. While the USSR was obsessed with building planes that flew higher and faster, Ufimtsev was scribbling down a mathematical theory that would change everything.
Okay, so what he came up with was the physical theory of diffraction. It sounds complicated, but here's the bottom line. It gave engineers the exact equations they needed to figure out how radar waves bounce off a complex shape. Think of it like a mathematical cheat code for invisibility. You could now design a plane with flat panels angled just right to bounce radar signals away from the source. Poof, it's gone.
And here's the craziest part. The Soviet Union decided his research had no military value and just let him publish it openly. But then, in the 70s, a young engineer over at Lockheed Skunk Works stumbled across a translation. He realized Ufimtsev's math was the missing piece of the puzzle. As Ufimtsev himself said, he just provided the theory. It was the Americans who had the guts to actually build the thing.
So if Soviet math is what created the F-117, it's just a perfect piece of historical irony that an old, aging Soviet weapon would be the thing to bring it down. I mean, this is a true David versus Goliath story, if there ever was one.
So on one side, you've got the F-117 Nighthawk, a billion-dollar, cutting-edge, alien-looking stealth fighter. And on the other side, the S-125 Neva. NATO called it the SA-3 Goa. It was this clunky, barely mobile surface-to-air missile system that, frankly, had a pretty unremarkable combat record. It was a relic. And let's be crystal clear here, by 1999, the S-125 was basically a museum piece. It was designed in the late 1950s. It was all analog from a totally different era, but it had one crucial feature: a tiny little crack in the F-117's armor that the Serbian air defense forces learned to exploit with absolute genius.
See, the F-11's biggest strength was also its secret weakness. It was designed to be invisible to modern high-frequency radars, but older, long-wavelength radars, like the Serbian P-18 system, operated on a frequency that could, just sometimes, get a very faint, very fleeting blip from the stealth jet. People had seen hints of this in the Gulf War, but it was pretty much dismissed. But a vulnerability is totally useless unless you've got the ingenuity to exploit it. And this is where Colonel Zoltán Dani and his crew enter the story. They didn't just get lucky. No way. They turned their technological disadvantage into a stealth-killing trap. So how did they do it? Well, first, they noticed NATO pilots were getting arrogant, flying the same predictable routes night after night. Second, Dani made his crew masters of shoot and scoot. They were constantly on the move, never staying put long enough to get hit by anti-radar missiles. And third, they used their old P-18 radar like a passive tripwire. But once they thought a stealth jet was close, they'd pull the trigger on the final, most dangerous step: the ambush. They absolutely knew that the second they switched on their main targeting radar, every missile designed to kill them would turn their way. So they drilled relentlessly to get their activation time down to an absolute maximum of just 20 seconds. 20 seconds. That's all they had to find, lock, and fire at an invisible target before they themselves were toast. On that fateful night, the trap was set. They saw a blip on the long-range radar. Dani ordered them to try for a lock. The first 20-second burst, nothing. They try again, still nothing. They were seriously pushing their luck. Then, on the third try, just as the F-117 pilot opened his bomb bay doors, which slightly increased its radar signature, the operators got a solid lock. 2 missiles just screamed into the night sky, and the ghost was hit. So yeah, the downing of Vega 31 became the stuff of legend. But that's not where the story ends, not even close. The official story has always been that only one F-117 was ever lost in combat, but evidence that's come out over the years, confirmed by the pilots who were actually there, tells a very, very different story. Take a look at this. This timeline basically reveals the secret NATO kept for decades. Just a month after Vega 31 went down, it happened again. April 30th, another F-117 gets smacked by the same missile system. It survived, but just barely. And then there are these persistent rumors of a third hit in May. This wasn't a 1 in a million lucky shot. It was a repeatable tactic. And that second hit? It is not a rumor. We know it happened thanks to accounts from the American pilots themselves. A missile from another S-125 crew just tore through the wing. The jet was leaking fuel so badly it needed multiple mid-air refuelings just to limp back to base. It was so wrecked, it was just quietly written off. Its combat career was over. The first shootdown was not a fluke. The Serbians had figured out how to hunt the ghost, and they did it again. And this brings us right back to the man who started it all. Ufimtsev's own words really sum it all up perfectly. Stealth was never some magic invisibility cloak. It's all about shrinking the window of opportunity for your enemy. But as Zoltán Dani's crews proved, if you're smart, disciplined, and brave, a 20-second window is all you need. So why does this all matter? Because this story is the ultimate proof that no technology, no matter how advanced, is ever invincible. In this endless cat and mouse game of warfare, it's so often the human element, strategy, ingenuity, and pure courage that makes all the difference. A 1950s missile system in the hands of a brilliant crew beat a 21st century weapon. And that kind of leaves you with a pretty big question, doesn't it? In our world of cyber warfare, hypersonic missiles, and AI-powered drones, what seemingly old-school idea or simple tactic is just waiting out there to completely flip the script on the battlefield of tomorrow? Hey, if you found this deep dive interesting, do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and let us know what you think down in the comments. And you gotta give credit where credit is due. Drop a comment that says Zoltán Dani is a legend.